American exceptionalism is the foundational myth of the modern U.S. empire. It is the belief that the United States is inherently different, morally superior, historically destined, and divinely sanctioned to lead the world, while framed as a noble mission to defend liberty and democracy. In reality, this ideology has been a cover for violent expansionism, regime change, economic enforcement, and systemic domination of the global South. From native genocide to drone warfare, from Panama to Palestine, exceptionalism functions not as an expression of virtue, but as imperialism with a halo. If you are into geopolitics and economics analysis, don't forget to like and subscribe the channel to be part of this community. American exceptionalism is rooted in Puritan theology and Enlightenment, liberalism, merged with white settler colonialism. The term itself entered mainstream discourse in the 19th century, but the ideological seed was planted much earlier in John Winthrop's 1630 sermon, implying divine favor and responsibility. By the 20th century, this evolved into the conviction that the U.S. had a moral obligation to spread capitalism and liberal democracy, often at gunpoint. As key doctrine components, we can check: the United States is uniquely virtuous. Its political system is a model for others. Its interventions are benevolent by default. International law applies to others, not the U.S. As said by Joe Biden in 2021, the United States is the greatest force for peace and justice the world has ever known. But the reality is quite different. The U.S. has been involved in over 400 military interventions. 1776, more than any other nation in history. Its foreign policy has consistently violated international norms under the justification of moral superiority. Before extending its reach globally, the U.S. practiced imperialism at home. Manifest destiny was the term coined in the 1840s to justify continental conquest. The expansion westward led to the systematic extermination and displacement of indigenous peoples, as well as the annexation of Mexican territory. As key events, we may mention Indian Removal Act in 1830, legally sanctioned ethnic cleansing, 60,000 indigenous people displaced, 15,000 deaths during the Trail of Tears, Mexican-American War between 1846 and 1848. United States seized 55% of Mexico's land. Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo legitimizes theft through force as ideological function, creates the precedent that conquest is righteous when Americans do it, and blends Christian theology with expansionist capitalism. Manifest destiny did not end in the 19th century. It mutated into Cold War containment and later into the post-9/11 doctrine of preemptive war. The 20th century saw the export of U.S. exceptionalism through military intervention, economic sabotage, and covert operations. The CIA and U.S. State Department played central roles in replacing democratically elected governments with client dictatorships. As key cases, let's see a few famous operations. Iran, in 1953. Operation Ajax overthrows PM Mossadegh after he nationalized British oil assets, replaces democracy with Shah's dictatorship. Savak police state follows. Guatemala, in 1954. Operation PBS, US-backed coup against Jacobo Arbenz for agrarian reforms. Civil war follows. Over 200,000 civilians killed in decades-long violence. Chile, 1973. CIA destabilizes Allende government via strikes, media, and embargoes. Pinochet dictatorship begins, -3,000 plus executed, 40,000 tortured. Vietnam War between 1955 and 1975, 3 million Vietnamese killed. Use of Agent Orange causes birth defects and cancers to this day. As broader pattern, more than 30 regimes changed or overthrown with U.S. support. Elections only respected when outcomes favor U.S. economic interests. Otherwise, and as you probably already heard, dictatorships willing for freedom. After the Cold War, the U.S. faced no global rival, yet it launched more wars than ever before. Under the banner of freedom, it created chaos and instability across the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. In Iraq 2003, 2011, weapon mass destruction, justification proven false. Over 1 million Iraqis dead and infrastructure were destroyed. Ethnic tensions inflamed and ISIS emerges. About 20 years in Afghanistan. That was the longest war in U.S. history, with costs of $2.3 trillion according to Brown University. And after all, Taliban returns, stronger than ever. Libya 2011, Gaddafi's fall via NATO bombing under the doctrine, cause and state collapses. Open slave markets appear in post-Gaddafi chaos. A shameful quote at that time was eternalized by Hillary Clinton on Gaddafi's death. We came, we saw, he died. Humanitarian war has become the latest euphemism for imperialism. That is the United States of America. American dominance rests not only on bombs, but on the control of global finance. The U.S. dollar, and institutions like the IMF and World Bank, are key tools of neo-colonial extraction. A few examples of sanctions as siege warfare. Venezuela, 40,000 plus deaths from blocked access to food medicine according to CEPA. Iran sanctions crippled health system. 6 million lack access to essential treatment. Considering debt diplomacy, we can see IMF conditionalities require austerity, privatization, and deregulation. Examples: Greece, 2011 to 2018, austerity devastates public health. Jamaica, 30 years of IMF loans result in stagnation and public sector collapse. John Perkins were accurate on Confessions of an Economic Hitman, where he said, "We were economic hitmen." Building empire by enslaving countries and debt. As U.S. dominance erodes, new centers of power challenge exceptionalism with alternative models and alliances. Washington's response has been aggressive containment, sanctions, and media warfare. As geopolitical flashpoints, we can see Ukraine, NATO expansion, triggers proxy war with Russia. U.S. pours $100 billion in military aid. Taiwan, the U.S. arms the island, provokes China in defiance of one China policy. Africa, U.S. military presence in 30-plus African countries. Attempts to curb China and Russia influence. Palestine, unconditional U.S. support to Israel despite documented war crimes. As new alternatives, we should mention BRICS+, creating swift alternatives. Reserve currency system. China's BRI, over $1 trillion invested globally, often without military strings. The myth of us leadership is faltering, and the empire is reacting with desperation, not diplomacy. Across the global south, movements, governments, and peoples are rejecting us hegemony, not just militarily, but ideologically. The spell of American moral superiority is being broken. As signs of change, we must mention de-dollarization, bilateral trade in yuan, rupees, rubles rising. Global South media, as RT Telazar, Al Mayadeen, CGTN, challenge Western narratives. Mass resistance. Latin America, Pink Tide 2.0, from Bolivia to Colombia. West Africa, movements rejecting neo-colonialism and French and United States presence. Global protests. Palestine, solidarity, anti-NATO uprisings. Empires fall not only from defeat, but from disbelief. When the world stops buying the story, the empire loses its mandate. American exceptionalism is not an abstract idea. It's a functional weapon, used to justify wars, destroy nations, and enslave economies. Behind every freedom mission is a resource to be looted, a government to be controlled, or a people to be silenced. It is time we call this ideology what it truly is: the spiritual mask of empire. And don't forget, like the video and subscribe the channel to keep thinking the world how it really is.